Well, welcome back to Conflict of Interest. Our guest tonight is Professor Bruce Jacobs from Monash University. Bruce is Professor of Asian Languages and Culture. Asian Languages and Studies. Sorry, Bruce, I'll get it right. But we're talking tonight about China, and Bruce, I've asked Bruce to stay on, Peter, for not only this segment but the next one, because I'm concerned about your outburst.
You're out of your depth, aren't you?
I'm concerned about your outburst. It was so appalling that there's so much at stake tonight. Yeah. I've asked him to stay on.
I'm happy to have Bruce on for the second segment. I just want to make it clear it's because you can't cope.
Oh, stop it, ridiculous. Bruce, as I said, he's a little erratic tonight, Peter, but we're watching him. Don't worry. Bruce, human rights. Peter and I fundamentally disagree on this. Human rights to me are universal. To say that China is somehow exceptional just seems to me to be, it's an argument that does get used in some parts of the West, but it just seems to me to be highly specious. What's your view?
My view is that human rights are universal, and I think that it's quite clear that no one, no matter whether they're Chinese or Western or any other group, likes to be arbitrarily arrested or arbitrarily tortured.
Where do these universal rights come from? Has God granted them, or where have they come from?
Well, do you believe that anyone likes to be tortured or arbitrarily arrested?
You've said they're universal. I'm just wondering where this universality
I think they apply to all people.
Where does it come from?
If they apply to Australians, they apply to...
Where does it come from?
Let's go back, hang on, Peter, let's go back to China, because the Olympics...
I just make the point that you're avoiding answering that.
No, we're not avoiding answering the question.
You had about 5 goes.
Listen, China, let's talk about Beijing. Olympics seem to have been quite successful. Did we expect too much of China, though? There was a lot of talk about liberalising in the lead up to the Olympics. Did we expect too much of China? Because it doesn't seem to me, and I think to most people, that very much has changed in terms of the political outlook of the Chinese regime.
I don't believe there has been a lot of change. I think the reasons that there was some hope by some people that there would be change was that the Chinese promised the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, that there would be changes and there would be opening up and there would be freedom of the press and things like that. In fact, there probably was a fair amount of freedom of the press for the reporters after the reporters protested. And they protested very hard, and then the Chinese did open up. But certainly there was a lot of pushing, and there was a lot of difficulty for the press in China this last couple of weeks.
During the Olympics?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. What's your view on the games themselves in terms of what it's done for China's image? Is it still status quo, or do you think the world's got a better handle on China?
I think as a result of the Olympics, the world, as a result of the Olympics, there was a lot more reporting on China and a lot more exploration. So I think there was a better feeling or a better understanding of China. And probably in terms of the Chinese regime, it was good in the sense that people saw, that China could produce an Olympics. And
but look, there's a number of elements here about the Olympic Games. First of all, for a closed country like China, which is basically run by a sort of dictatorship, to have an Olympic Games and run it successfully is a huge task. I mean, they had to make a lot of concessions.
Of course, it's a huge task for everyone.
No, but for them particularly, right? About having the international media there, about having many, many visitors and so on. So for them, I think it was a reasonable concession. I think they handled it very well. And I think they got a great deal of good publicity out of it. People seem to enjoy the Olympic Games. They seem to be friendly Olympic Games. Massive. If you look at the TV ratings in Australia for the Olympic Games, they've been absolutely massive. So I think it's been very positive for China, and I don't think there's been much downside to it at all for them.
Well, but issues have come up. I basically would agree with you that it was advantageous for the Chinese regime. But issues have come up, for example, where the Chinese said that there were 3 parks where protests could be had, but then when people registered for the protests, they got arrested, including 2 old ladies.
But so what? I mean,
well, I mentioned earlier, two people in their 70s.
Is that the best you can do? Is this
well,
the
no,
best
but I think it's
not symbolic at all.
I think it's symptomatic.
And is this the best criticism we can make?
No, but there are an enormous amount of criticisms you can make, Peter. There are an enormous number of criticisms you make, but it is symptomatic of. Look, you can say they did a terrific job, and I don't think.
So does the world. The world thinks they did.
I don't think Bruce is disagreeing with you. I think what Bruce is saying and what I'm saying to you. Well, hang on. Just what we're both saying. What we're both saying, Peter, is that China, at the end of the day, is not a liberal democracy, and
Well,
therefore it suffers from. Therefore, it suffers from.
and
So
that's what I'm saying.
that's something we agree with.
Yeah.
That China is not a democracy. It's not a democracy at all.
It is difficult, given the Chinese tradition, to govern 1.3 billion people. I mean, how should they do it? Should they become a democracy? Or
I think they would actually work better if they had more input and didn't try to control every sort of opinion which was different from that of the leadership. I think things would be much better when you have feedback.
No, but how do you control? How do you govern? What's the government system that you should have for a country like China? I mean, it's an almost
I think democracy
impossible
would be wonderful.
Well,
and
I'm a great
human
believer
rights.
in democracy, but I don't. I think that's just. I just don't think it wouldn't.
Well, let's
even
talk about.
go close to working
I
in
think
China.
what you have in now, where you have South Korea has become democratic and Taiwan has become democratic. India is democratic. These have shown that you can have non-Western countries can be democratic.
No, but the tradition's different. I mean, the tradition in India is that the Indians didn't make it a democratic country. The Indians inherited the democratic system from the British.
Well, not exactly, because if you look at the British colonial experience, you'll find that Pakistan isn't democratic, Burma's not democratic, Malaysia's not democratic, Singapore's not democratic. So these are places where
India did inherit their democratic system
but also
from the British system.
But it doesn't follow that you then become democratic.
it isn't strictly from the British. It's yes, but it was also Indians that did it. So you had leaders like Gandhi and Nehru who were really important in terms of democracy.
But China has a completely different history. And it's basically, Chinese history is about being run by dictatorships.
No, I don't think that's entirely valid.
their-
And if you go back to the imperial period, you actually had, under the Confucian system, it was an obligation of the Confucian officials to tell the emperor what needed to be told.
Well, that's a religious system. But
No, it wasn't religious.
but no, it's
it was
not. I
don't think
it was philosophical.
I think it means nothing today to say that China should be a democracy. I think China has worked very well. I think they've made huge progress, and I think to be able to have an Olympic Games the way they've produced has been a big step forward to China.
Let's go.
If China had not been under Mao for all those years until he died in 1976, China would be a much more advanced place today.
Absolutely.
Okay, so clearly the dictatorship wasn't advantageous to China economically, and it certainly wasn't advantageous. And it certainly wasn't advantageous
Nor
politically.
was Stalin in Russia.
No.
I mean, Stalin was somebody that Greg supported, so there you go.
I didn't support him. Don't be ridiculous. Now, let's just
As a
move
fellow
on.
traveller,
Let's
you
move.
Greg's too young.
I'm far too young to support
fellow
Stalin.
traveller.
That's exactly. You're sounding like a fellow traveller. There aren't many Maoists left, but you're one. I found
Stalin
one.
was dead before he was alive.
That's right. We're going to ring the museum and say I found a
can't
true
understand
believer,
that.
a Maoist in Australia.
I mean,
Peter Farris.
we keep hearing people say they're ex-communists proudly.
You're not ex. You're still there.
I've never been a communist. But
Let's talk about Taiwan. You mentioned Taiwan earlier.
Yeah.
Are we likely to see an escalation of cross-strait tension over the next, let's forecast 4 or 5 years out? If so, why?
I hope not, because one of Taiwan, in a sense, provides a big threat to China because it's a democracy, and this shows that a cynic culture can be democratic. So, in that sense, Taiwan's a big threat. But Taiwan's also one of the largest sources of foreign investment in China. And if there was a war, that would all be lost for China. So, and any war would be terribly devastating to both sides of the Taiwan
despite
Straits.
the posturing, Taiwan is not going to be attacked by China. I mean, there may be tension, there may be this, there may be that, but China would risk
Under what
everything.
circumstances would there be? Can you imagine circumstances
the
where
Chinese
it would
the
happen?
Chinese say their red line is if Taiwan declared that it's independent. Now, Taiwan doesn't have to declare it's independent because it already is independent, and it's treated as an independent country
But
by.
that's basically words, isn't it?
Well,
I mean,
to be,
terminology.
in other words, if they declare that they're a Republic of Taiwan, then they've declared they're independent. But right now, I think everyone recognizes it's an independent sovereign country. Even places like Australia, which don't officially recognize Taiwan, but we have a big office there. And
It's
I
de
would.
facto independent. There's no
Yes,
question
exactly.
about that.
So my hope is that this so-called status quo will continue.
Well, look, we've got to have a break now, but to assist Greg, we'd be very pleased to see you back.
Oh, I'd be pleased to help
for the
Greg
next
and you
segment.
and the audience.
We're here for your education and enlightenment here tonight. And when we come back,
What
we're
you
gonna,
need is
what-
re-education.
What we're going to talk
In
about
a
when we come
Chinese
back, we're going to
camp.
move on to the T word, I think, Peter, Tibet.
Yes, and we'll see you after the break.